In 1976, a retired British general sat down and did something strange. He lined up the greatest empires in human history: Assyria, Persia, Rome, the Arab caliphates, the Ottomans, the Spanish, the British. Empires separated by thousands of years, oceans, languages, religions, and technologies that had nothing in common. And he measured how long each one lasted from its rise to its fall. The number that came back stopped him cold. Again and again, no matter the century, no matter the continent, the answer was almost the same. About 250 years, 10 generations. An empire with chariots and an empire with steamships, dying on roughly the same schedule. So either this is the most haunting coincidence in all of history, or there is a hidden clock buried inside every great power, quietly counting down from the moment it's born. Today we're going to find out which it is, and the truth is stranger than either answer alone. The man was Sir John Glubb, and his essay was called The Fate of Empires. Glubb wasn't a cloistered academic. He'd spent decades as a soldier and commander in the Middle East, watching power up close. And when he tallied his empires, he kept landing in the same window. Most of them ran somewhere around 250 years, give or take. He even noticed why that number might be special. Of all the units we measure history in, one has barely changed in 3,000 years: the human generation. About 25 years from a person's birth to raising the next. And 10 of those generations comes out to roughly 250 years, which raises a chilling possibility that an empire doesn't die from the outside, it ages from the inside, generation by generation, like a living thing with a lifespan. And here's where Glubb's idea gets genuinely unsettling, because he didn't just find a number, he found a pattern. Every empire marches through the same 6 stages, in the same order, almost like clockwork. And once he names them, you'll recognize them, because you can see them happening around you. It starts with what he called the Age of Pioneers. A poor, tough, hungry people, often dismissed as barbarians by their neighbors, who suddenly burst outward with incredible energy and courage. Think of the early Romans, or the unknown desert tribes who exploded out to build vast empires. They have nothing to lose and everything to prove, and they conquer far beyond their size. That conquest brings the second stage, the Age of Commerce. The new empire is now huge and safe. Trade routes flow across it, and the same boldness that won battles now builds fortunes. Wealth pours in. But the people are still tough, still disciplined. They're getting rich, but they remember being poor. Then comes the third stage, and Glubb pinpoints this as the exact moment things start to quietly rot: the Age of Affluence. The money is now overwhelming, and here Glubb says something piercing, that wealth itself is the poison. The values shift. The earlier generations fought for glory, for the group, for something bigger than themselves. Now the goal is simply to get rich. Service slowly curdles into self-interest. The empire is at its peak, gleaming and proud, and already, underneath, it's beginning to soften. The fourth stage is the Age of Intellect. Awash in money, the empire pours it into learning. Universities bloom, art and science flourish. This is often when an empire produces its most dazzling culture. Sounds like a triumph, right? But Glubb saw a trap in it. He argued the empire starts to believe that cleverness can replace character, that you can think and debate your way out of any problem without the loyalty, courage, and sacrifice that actually built the thing. Endless argument replaces action. The brilliant talkers multiply while the doers fade. And that ushers in the fifth and most seductive stage of all, the Age of Decadence. Decadence is where Glubb's pattern becomes almost eerie to read, because he's describing the symptoms of a civilization that's lost its way, and they echo uncomfortably across the ages. An obsession with money and celebrity, a flood of frivolity, entertainment, and distraction, a loss of any sense of duty. Deep pessimism and cynicism creeping through the population, a quiet, spreading feeling that nothing really matters, and nothing is worth defending. Glubb pointed out that historians sitting in the dying days of empire after empire, in Baghdad, in Rome, wrote the same complaints across 1,000 years, that their leaders were corrupt, that the people were frivolous and obsessed with pleasure, that the old virtues were gone. The same lament, echoing down the centuries, from people who didn't know they were reading from the same script. And then comes the sixth and final stage, the age of decline and collapse. The empire, hollowed out from within long before any invader arrives, finally gives way. It's a powerful, almost hypnotic story, and if it's true, the implications for any great power alive today are obvious and grim. But now I have to stop and do the thing this kind of idea desperately needs, the thing that separates real understanding from a comforting myth. We have to ask, is it actually true? Because the moment you press on Glubb's neat 250-year clock, it starts to wobble. And how it wobbles is the most interesting part of this entire story. Here's the first problem, and it's a serious one. Critics point out that Glubb may have been doing something every one of us does without noticing, seeing a pattern because he went looking for one. The technical trap is called cherry-picking. If you get to choose which empires count and, crucially, when each one began and ended, you have enormous freedom to make the numbers land wherever you want. When did Rome begin? When it became a republic? An empire? When did it end? The fall of the Western capital, or the eastern half that survived another 1,000 years? Depending on the choices you make, Rome's lifespan swings from a couple of centuries to well over a millennium. The Chinese imperial system, in various forms, rolled on for over 2,000 years. Egypt's civilization lasted for thousands. Stack up enough examples and let yourself slide the start and end lines around, and 250 years can start to look less like a law of nature and more like a number you can manufacture. It's a humbling reminder of how easily the human brain invents patterns in noise. We are pattern-seeking creatures, and we'll find a clock ticking even where there's only random chance. So, is it all just an illusion then? Here's the twist. Not quite. Because while Glubb's exact 250-year figure doesn't hold up as a hard law, serious scientists have found that something real may be hiding underneath it. The most prominent is a researcher named Peter Turchin, who came from an unexpected background. He was originally a biologist studying the boom and bust population cycles of animals. He wondered if human societies might pulse with similar rhythms, and he helped launch a whole field to test it with hard data and mathematical models. He calls it cliodynamics. And what Turchin found is that empires and societies really do seem to move through long cycles, not on a fixed 250-year timer, but driven by forces that genuinely repeat. His cycles often run on the order of 2 to 3 centuries, which is why Glubb wasn't completely wrong. He just mistook a rough rhythm for a precise clock. And Turchin's explanation for why is far more concrete than moral decay. One of his central ideas has a clinical name: elite overproduction. Stay with this because it's genuinely illuminating. In the good times, a society generates more and more wealthy, ambitious, educated people who all want a seat at the top. More would-be elites than there are actual positions of power for them to fill. For a while, it's fine. But the number of thrones, offices, and top spots doesn't grow nearly as fast as the number of people fighting for them. Eventually, you get a dangerous surplus of frustrated, capable, ambitious people who were promised the top and can't get there. And history suggests that a glut of thwarted elites turning on each other and on the system, is one of the most reliable engines of political chaos, infighting, and breakdown. It's not that people got lazy or wicked. It's that the math of ambition stopped adding up. There's a second deep theory worth knowing, from an archaeologist named Joseph Tainter, and it reframes collapse in a way that's almost counterintuitive. Tainter argued that societies are, at their core, problem-solving machines. When a society faces a problem, it adds complexity to solve it. More bureaucracy, more layers, more rules, bigger armies, more infrastructure. And that works, at first. But here's his crucial insight. Complexity has a cost, and it runs into diminishing returns. The first layers of organization pay off enormously, but each new layer you bolt on to solve the next problem delivers a little less benefit for a lot more cost. Eventually, the society is spending staggering amounts of energy and resources just to maintain its own dizzying complexity. and getting almost nothing back. At that point, collapse can become, perversely, almost a relief, a sudden, brutal simplification when maintaining the elaborate system is no longer worth the price. In Tainter's view, empires don't fall because they get weak. They fall because they get too complicated to afford themselves. So now, look at what we actually have. Notice that Glubb, Turchin, and Tainter are circling the same fire from 3 different directions. Glubb saw the symptoms, the decadence, the cynicism, the loss of purpose. Turchin found a mechanism, too many elites fighting over too few positions as a society matures. Tainter found a structural law, the crushing, rising cost of complexity that every successful society eventually buries itself under. None of them has the whole truth, but together they sketch something compelling. The very things that make an empire succeed, wealth, growth, complexity, a flood of ambitious talent, are the exact same things that, taken to their natural extreme, eventually pull it apart. Success doesn't just lead to decline by accident. Success manufactures the conditions for its own decline. The seeds of the fall are planted, inevitably, at the moment of the rise. And maybe that's the real answer to why empires seem to die on a schedule. It's not a magic number stamped on them at birth. It's that the process, rise, enrich, complexify, overproduce, ossify, fracture, takes roughly the same span to play out in any large human society, because it's powered by human nature itself, which hasn't changed in 3,000 years. The same hunger that builds an empire is the hunger that, generations later, tears it apart from the inside. The clock isn't in the calendar. The clock is in us. So when you hear someone confidently announce that some great power today is right on schedule to fall, hold both truths at once. The precise 250-year countdown is probably a myth, a pattern our minds polish out of messy history. But the deeper rhythm underneath it may be very real, and if it is, then no empire is ever brought down purely by the enemy at the gate. It is undone, slowly and quietly, by the long shadow of its own success. Every golden age is also, if you know how to read it, the first chapter of a decline. The question is never really whether the empire is rich or powerful or brilliant. By the time it's all 3, the countdown has already begun.